Almaty, the former capital of Kazakhstan. Today, Almaty is still the cultural and commercial center of this Central Asian country, which is rich in resources. 1.3 million people live in the modern metropolis. Here, at the beginning of 2007, a crime took place that continues to keep Kazakhstan in suspense, and that has even led to political complications internationally. We found out that Aliyev, Kashlyak and Akim Kulov had organized a criminal group, and that the group had committed exceptionally severe crimes. The central criminal figure here is the surgeon Dr. Rakhat Aliyev. In the late 1990s, he employed violent methods to make a name for himself as head of tax investigation. He then switched to the Secret Service, becoming its deputy chief. In 2005, Aliyev rose to become deputy foreign minister. Finally, he became Kazakhstan's ambassador to Austria. Aliyev's right-hand man, Vadim Kashlyak. Rakhat Aliyev was a shareholder of the Noor Bank, the seventh largest bank in Kazakhstan. In early January 2007, he called a surprise board meeting. Abilmashen Gilimov, the chairman of the board at that time, recalls.
На самом деле, чуть раньше, где-то числа 15-го, Aliyev Rakhat.
On the 15th of January, or a bit earlier, Aliyev summoned me and the complete board. The directors of all the branches were also asked in. He said he wanted to get to know them, and as a future shareholder, to get an idea of the bank's top management. The Noor Bank had been founded by Abilmashen Gilimov and his university friend Joldas Timraliyev.
Внезапно сказал, что нам надо вылетать.
Aliyev suddenly said that Timraliyev and I should fly with him to Kiev.
По какому поводу? Так как это незапланированные.
Of course, we asked him why. It hadn't been planned. He answered that negotiations about the purchase of a local bank and insurance company were going to take place there.
По покупке местного банка и страховой компании.
Police headquarters in Almaty. The former head of Aliyev's security service, Aydarkhan Bektibayev, outlines the events of January the 18th. Bektibayev is a co-defendant, but also appears as a witness in the trial against Aliyev. I picked up Kashlyak, and on our way to the airport we were supposed to collect two bankers, Gilimov and Timraliyev. I got out of the car to welcome them. I knew Gilimov very well. Just before reaching the airport, we had to change to Aliyev's security chief's car. We were told that the charter plane was 1.5 hours late. Then they took us to a big house outside the city. In that house, Aliyev puts both bankers under serious pressure. Aliyev accuses the two Noor Bank managers of business malpractice. He locks them up separately and takes Gilimov's and Timraliyev's passports, their mobile phones, and their personal belongings.
Aliyev вместе с Kashlяком.
Aliyev and Kashlyak locked me in a room and interrogated me for 30 to 40 minutes. Then they left, and Bektibayev was posted to guard me, so that I couldn't escape. Aliyev's plan is to force the kidnapped Gilimov and Timraliyev to transfer their shares in the Noor Bank to him and to resign as managers. He also has his eye on an office complex in which the Noor Bank has an interest and which is worth over $80 million. With forced signatures, Aliyev plans to acquire it via a frontman for next to nothing. Aliyev threatens to kill Gilimov. He maltreats Timraliyev in the fitness room.
Я периодически требовал отпустить нас.
I kept on insisting that he let us go, and told him that keeping us there by force was illegal. He answered, "In this country, I can do what I like. Nothing can happen to me here."
Что хочу, то и делаю. В этой стране я могу все что угодно делать, и мне ничего за это не будет.
Armangul Karpasheva, Joldas Timraliyev's wife, describes the cruelties her husband had to suffer on the evening of January the 18th.
He told me that he didn't sleep all night, that he was handcuffed the whole time, and that Aliyev and Kashlyak beat him up. Then they took him to the shooting range and shot in front of his feet. From time to time, they also aimed at his head.
The interrogation lasts the whole night. In the late afternoon of January the 19th, Gilimov finally manages to persuade Bektibayev to let him make a phone call.
Он при мне звонил жене, и он жене прям был такой текст примерно, что
While I was in the room, he spoke to his wife.
мы находимся, у Раке, как он там, они.
He told her that they hadn't flown anywhere, but had been brought to Aliyev. He told her, "I'm being detained here against my will. If I'm not back within 1 hour, you have to contact the police."
Не вернусь, вы можете вызывать там, сообщать в органы, вызывать полицию. Я показал телефон, говорю, вот звонок.
When Aliyev came in, I showed him the phone and said the police would soon be storming the place. After that, he went out of the room. And he came back with a bottle of whiskey. He sounded conciliatory and said, "Let's talk about it."
В примиренческом тоне говорить, давай все обсудим.
Fearing police intervention, Aliyev sets the two bankers free. Gilimov and Timraliyev are taken home by Bektibayev. On the afternoon of January the 19th, the two managers' odyssey comes to an end. For now. Both abstain from filing a report against Dr. Aliyev. They doubt that anyone would take legal action against him. On January the 22nd, at a staff meeting, Aliyev announces that Gilimov and Timraliyev are leaving the bank at their own request. Beforehand, they will transfer all their business interests to Aliyev. Aliyev's right-hand man, Koshlyak, is going to be new head of security. On January the 31st, a board meeting is convened in the Norbank for the business handover. Aybar Khasienov, head of administration, is also asked to come. Gilimov, however, refuses to attend the meeting at the Norbank. He's scared. His partner, Timraliyev, complies with the invitation, but promises his wife that he will call her by phone every 2 hours. This was the last time she ever saw her husband. At about 3 p.m., Timraliyev enters the bank and goes up to the 9th floor. Eyewitness Erlan Sasinbekov, at that time head of security of the Norbank, tells what happened then. Timraliyev entered the conference room. Then Aliyev, Koshlyak and Bekmuratov followed him in. The moment the door closed, I heard the muffled sound of punches, then screaming, and the sound of breaking glass. Meanwhile, Aybar Khasienov is being detained in another office and accused of having embezzled money. Askan Bekmuratov, an employee of Koshlyak, reports. After he, Koshlyak, had accused the other man, Khasienov, he said, "You're under arrest. I'm holding you until the financial police arrive." Then he stood up, took some handcuffs out of his trouser pocket and put them on the other man. The other man didn't defend himself and said he would cooperate with the police. Bekmuratov then has to go to the conference room. There he witnesses a degrading altercation between Aliyev and Timraliyev. He grabbed his hair, threw him to the ground and kicked him. Then he made him go down on his knees and kiss the soles of his shoes. There are 2 surveillance cameras in the hallway. Koshlyak has their evidence sabotaged. At around 4 o'clock, Koshlyak ordered me to put adhesive tape on the cameras. I covered one of them and turned the other towards the ceiling. Mrs. Karpasheva waits for her husband to call, in vain. From his chauffeur, she learns that Aliyev's car is parked outside the bank. Now she gets scared.
I called my husband. He didn't answer the phone, so I texted him. No reaction. I called all our friends and his colleagues at the bank, telling them to look for my husband. They told me they couldn't move freely in the bank.
Shortly before 6 p.m., all employees of the Noor Bank are sent home, 1 hour earlier than usual. Mrs. Karpasheva contacts the special unit Sober. Her husband gave her the number before he left, just in case. When the unit arrives at the Noor Bank shortly afterwards, Aliyev's plans get mixed up. The special unit is prevented from entering the 9th floor by the bank's security guards. The situation threatens to escalate. Aliyev intervenes personally, ordering Bektibayev, head of his security service, to come and see him. He immediately told me that members of the special unit Sober had attacked the bank. You couldn't tell what really had happened, but that's what he told me. Aliyev orders his security guards to record the incident according to his version. He made us sign the plain paper. Someone else would then fill in the report. He dictated to me what he wanted written in the name of Bektibayev. That the special unit men had broken into the bank and had tried to steal important documents. While the members of the special unit Sober are being arrested, head of administration Aybar Khasyenov's wife has no idea what is happening to her husband, who is being detained at the bank.
I called his colleagues. That was at 8 p.m. They told me that something had happened, but they didn't exactly know what. They said Aliyev had arrived. I waited all night long. Our daughter kept on trying to call him and sent him text messages.
At around 11:30 p.m., Aliyev has Aybar Khasyenov and Zhaldash Timraliyev bundled out of the bank via the staff elevator. On their faces you could see bruises from the punches. The captives, disguised and tied up, are taken outside through the rear entrance. They are taken out of the city in separate cars. At one of Aliyev's residences, the two men are locked up separately. Again, Aliyev started to maltreat both of them. They had to kiss his shoes, go down on their knees, and he hit them. I don't want to say any more than that, in case the victims' relatives are against it being made public. In these rooms, Zhaldash Timraliyev and Aybar Khasyenov are held until February the 9th. During this time, they are repeatedly maltreated by Aliyev and sedated with injections. Aliyev officially announces that the two bank managers are on the run because of a tax scandal.
For 3 days, there was no sign of life from my husband. On February the 4th, I wrote a letter to the president. I wrote that my husband had disappeared on the 31st of January, and I asked for his help. As a model for my letter, I used the report my husband had written after his first abduction. After that, 3 or 4 hours after the letter was published on the internet, my husband called. I could tell right away from his voice that he'd been forced to make the call. He told me that he was on the run from the financial police. Yet I knew that he'd done nothing. He's a very honest person. I couldn't interrupt him. He spoke very quickly and hung up immediately.
Не поверила этому звонку, тем более, что я пыталась хоть слово вставить, но он мне не давал ничего говорить. Быстро, очень быстро все сказал и положил трубку.
He told me he was hiding from the financial police. And he told me that he'd be home in 2 or 3 days, but I could hear from his voice that he spoke under pressure.
For the two wives, these phone calls were the last signs of life they ever received from their husbands. Abilma Shengilimov's decision not to attend the board meeting at the Noorbank on January the 31st most probably saved him from being kidnapped. On February the 7th, he was arrested by the financial police. Shortly afterwards, Aliyev made him an offer.
Он говорит, если хочешь, я могу это отменить.
If you want, I can undo this, he said.
Следующее условие.
In return, you have to fulfill the following conditions. The wives mustn't give any interviews. And tomorrow, they must apologize to me for their lies.
На завтра же должны через средства массовой информации официально извиниться.
I said we agreed,
за то, что
but on one condition,
они оболгали его в похищении людей.
that Timur-Aliyev and Khasyanov would be set free. He said, all right, you do your part, and then we'll see. Well, he probably meant that he'd see whether or not he would set them free.
И на этом разговор закончился, меня увезли в тюрьму.
Постучал в дверь Алиев, я открыл, он
Aliyev knocked at the door. I opened.
еще одни.
Then he gave the two men injections.
С Кашляком Вадимом мы
Together with Koshlyak, we took them to the jeep.
припаркованный джип там на аллее, из которого
Then a
вышел
man got out of the jeep. He looked Asian.
человек, азиат, лет 45.
Later on, I learned that he was Alnur Musayev.
Ну, в общем, когда впоследствии я узнал, что это Альнур Мусаев.
Alnur Musayev, the former chairman of the Committee for National Security, was also wanted internationally by the police at that time.
Кашляк Вадим.
Koshlyak, Aliyev, and Musayev took away the bankers.
И получается, уже после обеда
Before they left, Aliyev instructed me to burn all the clothes
все вещи
and the
банкиров,
syringes.
шприцы, вот это все сжечь.
The afternoon of February the 9th, 2007 was the last time that Zhaldas Timur-Aliyev and Aybar Khasyanov were seen alive. Their families are still hoping that the two men survived. On February the 15th, 2007, having covered up the traces of the kidnap, Aliyev travels from Almaty to Vienna to take up his job as Kazakhstan's ambassador to Austria. He's already set up business connections in Austria in advance and purchased himself a respectable domicile. At the end of May, an international warrant is issued for Rakhat Aliyev's arrest. He loses his diplomatic immunity, his bank accounts are frozen, and an application is made to Austria for his extradition. On June the 1st, Aliyev is arrested in Vienna by the Austrian police. But a short while later, he is freed again, on bail of €1 million. Austria justifies its refusal to extradite Aliyev by saying that he could not expect fair legal proceedings in Kazakhstan. The decision of the district court, which is considered final because the prosecution decided not to protest it, meets with incredulity, especially from the two lawyers who represent the interests of Kazakhstan in Austria.
Also, ich glaube, man könnte das so formulieren, mit dem rechtlichen Gehör.
I think we can put it this way. Legally, things do not seem to have been carried out all that accurately. We made it quite clear that if Dr. Aliyev's defense wanted to make its statements, we would want to respond. We communicated that very clearly, to the court as well as to the public prosecutor's office. And then, before we knew it, the decision to make extradition illegal had been taken. It was, how shall I put it, a rather unusual manner of proceeding.
Ich glaube, ohne damit zu unterstellen, dass sich die
Without accusing the courts of allowing themselves to be influenced by such considerations, I believe that a certain amount of political calculation prevails in Austria in this regard. The aim being not to be involved in this matter, if at all possible.
nach Möglichkeit nicht involvieren zu lassen. Wobei die dafür
There again, the reasons given for the decision by the Vienna District Court are less than convincing, and in my view, cannot be reconciled with the actual conditions in the Republic of Kazakhstan.
nicht in Einklang zu bringen sind. Wenn ich Ihre Fragestellung hernehme und
Referring back to your earlier question and the comparison with the United States, I assume that no court in Austria would have dared to refuse extradition for this sort of reason.
Mit einer vergleichbaren Begründung die Auslieferung zu verweigern.
Defense lawyer Werner Tomanek from Vienna gives a neutral assessment of the situation.
Das Ungewöhnliche in diesem Sachverhalt ist es, dass die Staatsanwaltschaft...
The unusual thing about this case is that the Public Prosecutor's Office failed to fight the decision in the first instance, which found in favor of the party for extradition. Normally, a decision that favors a party for extradition is challenged by the Public Prosecutor's Office at the regional court and goes at least beyond the first instance. The fact that this failed to happen is, in my personal experience, quite unusual. Even today, the public prosecutors still refuse to explain why Aliyev was not extradited and why he was brought to trial in Austria. What role does Austria play with regard to Aliyev? One thing is certain. As an ambassador in Vienna, Aliyev built up a network of lucrative fictitious firms. Embassy employee Elnara Shorazova played an important role here, as did Adolf Wahler, ex-president of the National Bank. Since August 2005, Wahler, alongside Shorazova and Aliyev, has been chairman of the board of the AV Maximus Holding AG in Vienna. Together with the company of the same name in Geneva, Maximus directs all the transactions for the Aliyev Group outside Kazakhstan. However, the business address given in the commercial register reveals no trace of a holding company. The same applies to further companies, such as GST Global Sugar Trading GmbH, Global Sugar Privatstiftung, and Asta Beteiligungsmanagement GmbH. Here too, there are not even company nameplates at their doors. Aliyev's network also includes Armorial Trading GmbH, Staat Management Consulting, and the TV production company Speedy. Again and again, Shorazova's name appears. After some hesitation, an employee of the production company finally provided Shorazova's mobile number.
Ja, guten Morgen, Frau Shorazova. Mein Name ist... Wir würden gerne ein Interview mit Ihnen führen. Es geht um die Verbindungen, Geschäftsverbindungen, die Sie mit Herrn Dr. Aliyev haben bei diversen Firmen, und wir hätten da gerne ein Interview mit Ihnen geführt. Ist das möglich?
Nein, es gibt keinen Kommentar dazu.
Gibt keinen Kommentar dazu?
Nein.
Sehr schade. Auch zu keinem späteren Zeitpunkt?
Nein.
Mhm. Ja, dann tut's mir leid. Danke für das Telefonat.
Gerne, bitte.
Grüß Gott.
A last attempt to talk to Elnara Shorazova in person was a visit to her private address.
Ja. Frau Shorazova?
Ja.
Guten Tag. Wir hatten heute...
Welche Frau Shorazova? Es gibt viele.
Oh, Elena, glaube ich.
Elena ist nicht da.
Augenblick. Vorname Elena. Nein, Elnara. Magister Elnara.
Nein, sie ist nicht da.
Elnara ist nicht da. Wann? Ich habe heute Morgen mit ihr gesprochen. Ich bin von einer deutschen Fernsehproduktionsfirma und wollte ein Interview mit ihr führen.
Ja, sie will das nicht machen.
Mhm.
Also sie ist nicht da.
Sie ist nicht da?
Nein.
Kann ich sie vielleicht morgen nochmal, oder wissen Sie, wann sie wiederkommt, dass ich sie selber nochmal sprechen kann?
Nicht.
Mhm. Kann nichts machen. Sie wissen auch nichts, wo sie ist, oder?
Nein.
Ich habe mit ihr telefoniert heute Morgen.
Ja, das geht mich leider nichts an.
Sind Sie die Schwester, oder?
Ja.
Ja. Okay.
Ich kann leider nichts machen.
Mhm.
Entschuldigung.
Verstehe ich. Okay. Ja?
How could Elnara Shorazova, as an employee of an embassy, simultaneously be managing director of several companies and also a citizen of two different countries? And what about Adolf Wahler? In May 2007, he publicly distances himself from any connection to Aliyev. The magazine Format says, considering this is an extremely explosive political subject, Wahler will resign as chairman of the board of Maximus and step down from his work as a consultant of the Aliyev Group. But in December 2007, Wahler still appears in the officially certified commercial register as a member of the holding company's supervisory board. Who provided bail of 2.3 million euros for Aliyev and his entourage? After all, every one of Aliyev's bank accounts had been frozen beforehand. There are still many questions to be answered, and Aliyev, still wanted internationally, has meanwhile disappeared. The Kazakh authorities believe that he and his gang are still in Austria, however. Aliyev's villa in Vienna, a high-security wing. Nobody opens the door. An employee says he is ready to talk, but has no information. The next day, too, the doors remain closed. The surveillance cameras follow every movement, however. In December 2007, Aliyev's henchmen are sentenced in Almaty. Mrs. Karpasheva appears as witness and continues her fight against the once so powerful Aliyev. The proceedings are followed with great interest in the Presidential Republic of Kazakhstan. A showdown with Aliyev is clearly long overdue.
For a long time, he considered himself untouchable. He thought he could do whatever he wanted in this land. Just think of 2001, when he got off scot-free after he prepared his takeover. The last straw was when he kidnapped the 2 senior managers at the Nur Bank. In my opinion, if Aliyev considers himself innocent, he should face trial and prove his innocence. I consider him a coward.
Even though they only acted on Aliyev's behalf, 21 accomplices are sentenced to between 1 and 20 years in jail. The court pronounces no death penalties, even acquitting 2 accused who voluntarily handed themselves in and gave evidence. Aydarkhan Bektibayev is given a 5-year prison sentence. Erlan Sasenbekov gets 10 years, as does Askan Bekmuratov. The main culprit, Rakhat Aliyev, as well as his sidekicks Kashlyak and Musayev, are sentenced in absentia in Kazakhstan. Aliyev is the only one sentenced to 20 years in prison. Although they are internationally wanted, the 3 men are still on the loose.